Hello there. Thank you for coming to my video. On this dark evening, I just wanted to talk about something that is really important to me, and that's empathy. And I specifically wanted to talk about how rare it is and how important it is, how it's intelligent, it's attractive in a person, it takes strength to practice, and it's actually kind of countercultural. It's cool. You know, everyone and their mother is online these days, and the internet is, it's beating the dead horse to say, a place that people really kind of bring out the worst parts of themselves and are less afraid to be mean, divisive, cruel, judgmental, etc. And I really feel like that anonymous world, the old fashioned, like, people will say things online that they won't say in real life, is starting to just become the world. You know, the internet's our town square. It's where we congregate, discuss, share our opinions. And I think I'm not the only one who's noticed that the attitudes and ways of behaving on the internet are starting to bleed out into real life. And I think the internet's lack of empathy is starting to just become the default. I really think it's truly countercultural to be just empathetic. It is the minority, and it's kind of whatever you want to call it. A little bit punk. I don't actually have any connection or attachment to the punk style, but it's maybe, it's the new edge. Maybe you're a little edgy if you're empathetic, because it's so rare and so looked down upon. You know, I was in a mini conversation, like a back and forth on a social networking thing. Not like one of the ones where people actually know who you are, but where you have a username and you can hide behind that. And someone made a post about how this person's husband had ironed their shirt on the table. And they were frustrated because this ruined the table's lacquer, the veneer or whatever on the table. They were just saying they were a little frustrated. Like, husband had a job interview, ironed his shirt on the table, and look how it ruined the table. And there are a myriad of comments. And one of them was just saying, I think your husband's a moron. And I took exception to that. And I said, well, either that or he was in a rush and he made a mistake. Either or. And that person was actually kind of reasonable in their reply. We had like a back and forth where they said, it's actually a sign of intelligence to not make a mistake when you're in a rush. And I said, well, people's brains work differently, and I don't think that's always universally true. I think some people just get thinking about something and they make a mistake. Well, it wasn't that person, but it was another person who came in, guns blazing, freaking out, so angry, saying just this whole diatribe about how I'm probably a moron because it's moronic men who make excuses for other moronic men, and it's women who have to pick up the slack for them. They just came in like so angry, and they said a bunch more, Now, I should have, by internet cultural rules, engaged this woman in her level of anger, reduced myself to her level, and said something about how, I don't know, I don't really have anything to come up with because I didn't think of something, because I didn't reply like that. I said, and I mean this genuinely, I said, you seem very unhappy, and I'm not sure why, but I hope you can find out and be happy and find peace. And I said, I don't feel like engaging in this. Have a good day. And they replied saying, are you done virtue signaling now? And it's a whole diatribe about men. And it just struck me, like, again, this person obviously came in looking for a fight. And I couldn't help but see so clearly someone who's just unhappy. So unhappy. And I don't know why. I can make assumptions, but to make those assumptions and to present them to that person would just be a form of arguing and belittling. So I just left it there. Whether it's she has a complicated relationship with whoever raised her who was a male in her life, or has been hurt by a partner, or just spends too much time online and is starting to perceive online men as being the default, it's all too obvious to me that this person has some kind of an issue. And if I'm to engage in an argument with this person, neither of us know each other, and I'm simply going to be another male who slots into this person's issue, and I'm not going to make anything better, either for the people in her life or for her or for me. And that kind of a little mini interaction plays out so many times. And I think you see it the most often in politics, and politics drives me nuts for this. I think empathy is a sign of intelligence, at least emotional intelligence. And it's so rare, and I think people are making themselves more unhappy and making the world a worse place at the same time by engaging in this constant online battleground where a lot of things are taken into account, but not empathy. And people honestly are showing like a lack of insight and, I would say, intelligence to a degree when they engage in these things. It doesn't mean I don't think they're capable of intelligence. I'm saying they're behaving unintelligently. It's a different thing. So yeah, politics is full of this. And I'm going to use American politics as an example because, unfortunately, whether you're American or not, it's saturated. Everywhere is saturated with it. And I say unfortunately because, sometimes I just want to break, and it's everywhere. It's all a lot of people can talk about. And I'm not even American. I can't vote for or against anyone. And so I just feel like I'm being subjected to these opinions constantly. But, to put it into so many words and to kind of reduce it down and simmer it down to kind of like the base statements people make and make a general archetype of it, it'd be like, MAGA or Republicans are all knuckle-dragging, white trash, cult followers, racist, sexist, whatever. That would be like the broad statements, the broad, harsh statements that a lot of people make about Republican voters. And then from Republican voters about Democrats, it can be all manner of things, but, like they're groomers, they're stupid, they're sheep, they're things like that. To be honest, the reason I had more to say about the Republicans, more words, is because the internet and a lot of social media is like really overwhelmingly anti-Republican, at least like the ones I'm presented with. And so it's not a function of my biases that I had more words that were mean about them. It's literally just I constantly see things stated like that. And both sides, I have to wonder if they've ever dealt with diversity of thought in their day-to-day life. Or like, do they know anyone who disagrees with them in real life? And if so, do all those people fit their stereotype of the opposite side? Because if so, they live in a loony bin. Because I doubt it. The people stereotyping Republicans miss the business owners, the small town, rural people, the whatever, who are voting for a multitude of reasons that don't have anything to do with the worst thoughts that these people have about why those people might be voting for who they're voting for. And the same goes for in reverse. And it occurs to me that both sides have things they care about. They both have things they're conscientious about. And they both, this is the key, believe for different reasons that their side or their views are the ones that can improve the world, their country, their community. And if you don't keep that in mind and you believe earnestly that the other side is full of morally deficient, unintelligent people, I think you're not thinking. And I think you're not trying to, probably most of the time. And I think politics is just a release valve for people's more antisocial tendencies too. I think in society, we live in a society where you most of the time have to control yourself. And, if you have a job, you can't just rip apart the customer that is being annoying or your boss if they're being annoying or whatever. And then there's this arena presented, which is like such low-hanging fruit and where people can kind of vent and exercise those muscles, those hate muscles a little bit. And I believe in something, and there's a properly study-based term for it, and it's evading me right now, eluding me. But there are acceptable release valves given to society for their anger. And that when people have those, they just like let the hot water flow. When the Russian invasion of the Ukraine occurred, for a while, and it still is, I guess, a safe release valve for anger are Russian people. So I separate very much, people's opposition to any government or military action from people's opposition and dislike of like the people themselves. And you see it all the time. I mean, stereotypes of Russians being stupid, Russians being inept, Russians being ignorant. I'm going to have a bunch of synonyms for basically Russians being stupid, because this stereotype, which goes back a long way in Western propaganda and thought, is a safe way to have an opportunity to hate a group of people or like rag on a group of people. Whereas normally, any kind of biases or like ragging against on a group of people just on the basis of the circumstances of their birth is considered quite unfashionable. But here's a release valve for that. And so you get a little chance to just, be like that. And people for once maybe won't call you out on it. And so people really get into it, including people who couldn't have pointed to the Ukraine on a map or don't know anything about Russian culture or history or Ukrainian culture or history. They just know that this event happened. They're not happy about it. And they now have a golden opportunity to really just hate people. And so they use it. And I think politics within Western countries functions very similarly very often. So people have like a list of grievances and most often hear about the other side through the filtered opinions of their own side. And they build this like this fake or this illusion of what the other side believes and why they do what they do. And that creates a acceptable punching bag, because if the other side is full of groomers, full of idiots, full of I just don't want to. Anyway, full of the worst kinds of people to you, then of course you feel justified in venting all of your rage and frustration, being exclusionary, and just being like small-minded, because it's a chance to do that. Humans are tribalistic in our history, and we love having in-groups and out-groups. And so empathy is a lot harder than just letting it out, being angry. But I think empathy is genuinely, to me, and I think it just is, it's a sign of a developed and intelligent and well-rounded person. And I don't think having gone through certain things are any excuse. Like, I would never really get into it because I'm not one for being like, woe is me, but like I've been through enough things, being treated, a certain kind of way. And I have never felt that those experiences gave me a lease to be cruel in life, or to be so closed off or have such presuppositions that I refuse to see people or attempt to do my best to see people for who they actually are or what they actually believe. And I try my best to have charitable views of people. And I think it's a really good mind exercise to think, okay, I disagree with this person, maybe deeply. I'm going to assume that this person isn't bad, isn't mean, doesn't desire bad things for the world. And so I'm going to try my best to put myself in their shoes and think of why they think how they think. And again, starting from the charitable side is the key thing here. Otherwise, it's not really empathy. You're just like, well, again, you're assuming, and you're trying to pin them with a label or oh man, the word is just slipping. A fault, whatever another word for that would be. Pin them with a fault that would make them a valid target for your ire. And if you can put them in some group, some category that is so bad that you can dehumanize them and hate them, then you have your little outlet for really what's going on inside of you. And I mean, that sounds like a little maybe like therapeutic or whatever, but it's factually true. I don't really care if the truth sounds like virtue signaling or whatever I got accused of, or if the truth sounds soft. Because sometimes the truth is maybe kind of soft. And that's not a bad thing, There's a lot of hard things in the world. But maybe the truth is, in this case, that when people are being angry with one another, they're very often angry at something within themselves, which can also be, if you accept that and understand that, can help you build more empathy for others. I mean, being a young man in the West, I've heard a million different ways how terrible men are and boys, and how undeserving of empathy they are, and how their mental health doesn't matter, and all these things. And none of that's excusable. And that kind of like sex-based hatred is wrong no matter which way it flies. But there's a lot of people who involve themselves in that kind of stuff who have had some very poor experiences. And understanding that at the very least helps me be more at peace in myself and helps me have positive feelings for humans, for my fellow humans, and to not feel like I want to isolate from them, or even worse, to feel like I'm better than them, because it's lonely at a mountaintop. And if you walk around thinking you're the smartest, most correct, most moral, most thought through human being, you're going to find like yourself having a hard time connecting with others, because it's hard to respect and meet someone where they're at if you think they're below you. Not to mention, it's just not correct. I mean, to use a Christian moral, take the log out of your eye before you point out the speck in someone else's. It's a good moral. It's a rare person on this earth who is not, hey, it's a strong word, but like deficient in some way, lacking in some way, self-centered in some way, ignorant in some way. And if you don't believe you are any of those things, that means you're almost certainly all of those things and then some. That's just a fact of life. And it's hard to tell sometimes if people are being a little bit funny or trying to be, but I've met people who genuinely would state that they themselves are the exception to humanity's shortcomings. Like, I'm not ignorant. I'm not self-centered ever. I'm so intelligent. Blah, 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 blah. Which, okay, it's not wrong if you're, thinking you're intelligent doesn't really line up with the rest of those. Some people just are intelligent. It's okay to know that. But thinking you're better than everyone else. People who unironically think that, again, I would say maybe at some point you were made to feel less than. And it's not an excuse, but it helps me to feel more positively about them, like I said. I think it's really sad how empathy has kind of gone out of vogue. And I think algorithms are a big part of this, a massive part of this. Controversy gets clicks. And again, people would blame so when I say algorithms, the fact is that's actually like humans. And it's not a bad thing about humans. We have like threat detection systems and systems that are built to help us identify things that are emotionally upsetting, and things that emotionally upset us can often be things that are important for our well-being. And so when we see something that's upsetting, a part of our brain's like, maybe I need to engage with this because maybe this will somehow help me do better today or tomorrow, even if it's entirely not true, And that goes for like bad news cycles, doom scrolling. Your brain is doing something very protective, but it's misfiring. It's not actually being protective in this instant, though it's trying very hard. Which leads into another thing. I feel like I'm just so cognizant, and it's an important realization to me that we ultimately are. So I think humans are special. As I stated in a previous video, I'm against scientific materialism. And I mean, it's also just a felt thing, but it's also philosophically something, I believe, which is that there's some special quality to the human. And so I'm not trying to reduce us to the level of an animal literally, but we do have our animal selves. Like, we have a body, we need water and food, we need sleep, we need physical contact, we need social connection. And we've developed very quickly a world that is so fast moving, so in some ways anti-human, and we're all in our own ways trying to navigate it and trying to make it through. And we have wiring and brains that just recently were being stretched only so far as your local community. We're tasked with, avoiding the thing rustling in the bushes or paying attention to it, getting along with your tribe and being suspicious of people who come into it or aren't from it because of a multitude of reasons historically. All these things. And then all of a sudden we've been thrust into this post-industrial revolution milieu, and there's so much going on, and it has taken not enough time for all that to change that our brains have had time to catch up. We're out of sync. And a lot of that is the cause of our modern misery. We're not living how humans were kind of built to live. And I'm not saying it's all bad, like here I am sitting in my poorly lit room talking to you about empathy because we live in modernity. And I'm enjoying making this video, and I like being creative and all these things and having more free time than people did historically, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this isn't some doomer thing, but it's just a fact that modernity is a very challenging place to be, and we're all sharing this challenging place. And I really don't think it benefits anyone to be overly judgmental or short-sighted, and to not at least try to have empathy for others. And I just think it's a really attractive thing. I think people will be surprised if you can develop that skill and use it and practice it, how much that makes you stand out in a good way, and how much you can really make a positive impact on others. Being a good listener and seeing people for who they are will get you very far in life. So it's a worthwhile skill to look into, even if just for the ways it can benefit your own self, which maybe sounds not very empathetic. But again, having empathy for humans, we do often do things with a partial element of self-interest. But again, that's how our system is made. But we often do things not for self-interest, and we can do things for a mixture of both. Like a cynic will say, oh, someone who is all moral and is volunteering or gives to the homeless or whatever, they do it to feel good. So ultimately it's self-serving. I think it's beautiful that humans feel good when they do nice things. That's like really nice and a good thing, a sign of a good part of our species. And there's nothing wrong with doing something good because in part it makes you feel good. That's my talk on empathy, and I really think it's so important, and I really appreciate you listening. It's so important, I just had to get it out, even though it's, dark and I'm lit like I'm about to give a doomsday speech. I hope you're having a good one, and I hope to see you on the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.